Let's talk about Dad. You had a lot of opportunities to interview him, as we mentioned, but you had some tough ones. Interviewing him after Daytona in 90, 91, 93. One particular, you were dreading the interview in 1990. Talk about that particular interview, but also that's your job. You got a job to do, and I've seen it in broadcasting as, watching our pit reporters work. We've got, working at NBC, we had some amazing opportunities to work with some incredible people, and there's some new talent coming on. Kim Coon's been doing it quite a few years now, but Dylan Welch, and they all are put in these positions sometimes where you're going to interview somebody who's not happy, and there's a question that you have to ask this person that they don't want to answer. And now this person's Dale Earnhardt in front of you.
Well, if you think about it, we're the only sport that you get to talk to somebody immediately after they have lost. Mm-hmm. Either they're coming out of the care center, and, when I first started, I was interviewing, people that finished second, third, fourth, fifth, and some of them were happy, some of them were not, obviously. So 1990, everybody knows the story. He led, I think, 155 out of the 199 laps. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm going to interview Derek Cope. He is going to be thrilled to death. And they bring him to the gas pump at that time. And I knew Derek fairly well. We had actually dated roommates at one time. And, he was a catcher playing in baseball, and I was. So, we weren't tight, but we knew each other. I thought, man, Derek's going to be so excited. And then Alan Bestwick loses his mind when your dad, runs over the housing, I think it was, and blows the tire. And it's like, oh, my God, he's going to want to bite the microphone off. Yeah. So he comes into the garage area, and the older garage area, and I'm standing there beside the car as he pulls in and takes the window net down. And it may have already been down. And the person, that worked with the team at the time comes running up while I'm standing there waiting. Back up, give him some room. Give him some room. And your dad, how he sits in the car, he looked out there. And remember, this is 1990. I'd done my first broadcast.
You was only a couple
with
years
MRN in 1988.
Yeah.
I'll show you a picture of interviewing your dad when Taylor couldn't have been more than a year old. Got one of those. And he looks out and he said, tell Winston I'll talk to him whenever he's ready. And so it's a minute before we come down there. He goes ahead. He gets out of the car. And about this time, some more media's coming up around him, and we're standing toward the back of the car. And he looks at the media. He says, guys and gals, if y'all go sit on the bench, you remember those wooden benches that were in the garage area? He said, you guys go over there on the bench. NASCAR needs to get to the car. You go over there, and I'll talk to you as soon as I'm done with Winston. Then he looks at me, and you know how he can kind of pick at you. And he said, y'all ready to do this? And I said, well, they just went to Victory Lane and talked to Derek. He says, Derek, heck, I'm the story. Y'all need to be talking to me. And then he gives me that grin from under the mustache, just like, okay. So far, I'm okay. And then could not have been a better interview. And then, he I don't remember which order TV was in that whole deal. And then he went and talked to everybody else. It's like, wow. That just blew me away. 93 was a little different. 93 is when he had led a lot of the race, and Dale Jarrett passed him, and I don't think it helped matters, and that Jeff Bodine was one of the ones that gave Dale Jarrett a push, and it's been well documented that there was not a love lost there. And I talked to your dad at the gas pump, and I asked him 2 questions, and I got 4 words. Both answers were "got beat." I was like, okay, I know we're done here, and that's fine. He's whatever I asked him. He said, got beat. And left me with the perception is your dad wasn't a bad loser. Nobody likes to lose, and nobody hated to lose more than him. But when he felt like it was totally out of his control, it was very different than whether it was somebody else helped beat him or he could have done something different. That was the perception I was left with, that when he was shorter is when he thought he could have done something different versus nothing I could do about it.
Yeah. There was another opportunity in 93 when you were interviewing Dad when Rusty throws the water bottle. J.R. Rhodes and a couple other people were in the middle of that scrum. What do you remember about that?
So I remember that Rusty or your dad ran into Rusty early in the race.
Yep.
I went back and looked at it because I thought it was earlier than it was, but it was somewhere, around lap 45 or 50.
Rusty and Dad had been talking. Rusty came on the show, and Rusty had been talking with Dad at the start of the race. They were both recognizing that Jeff Gordon was going to be something they were going to have to deal with and long term. And so they felt like that, at Bristol, between the two of them, they would decide not to, give each other a hard time, and they were both going to team up and give everything they could to Jeff Gordon. And so race gets going, and as soon as Dad pops Rusty in the back end, sends Rusty in the wall, and Rusty's like, "What the hell? We were, we were not going to do that. We were going to." Try to run Gordon as hard as we could, and here you are. It's almost like Rusty felt like Dad lied to him, and took advantage of it. And so it seemed like he showed his frustration after the race. But what was that like being down there?
Yeah, I did not know that part of the story. I just knew doing the radio that Rusty had 450 laps to be mad, and he was mad, and they took the cars to second place finish and third place, and I think your dad finished second to the gas pump. And we're just standing there beside the window of the car where he'd gotten out, just talking about the race matter of fact. And all of a sudden, I felt something that felt, like it started to rain a little bit, and like something bounced off the hood of the car. I didn't hear anything because I had headsets on, and then, it either whizzed by or bounced off your dad's shoulder, and we both kind of stuttered. And then he looks over, and on the right front of the car is Rusty, who was expressing his displeasure. And we're in the middle of the interview, and I went back and listened to it, and I kind of stuttered and stammered trying to explain what was happening. But it frustrated, it frustrated or scared me, not scare, but it's like startled me. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And your dad, is he's first responding to Rusty and trying to explain what happened, and Rusty was having none of it. So then Dale's going to walk over there and talk to him and try to explain what happened, and people are trying to stand between them, thinking it might be a little bit could get physical, but I don't think the two of them would have gotten physical. They just weren't that way. But I remember Rusty saying, "I hadn't forgotten Talladega," because it was the same year that he had gotten into it. That's the one thing I remember, but I just remember how it startled both of us. And then it was, a normal heated on Rusty's side and trying to explain on your dad's side. But, being in the middle of the interview and, had only been doing this 3 or 4 years, I had never experienced anything. And that's one that gets brought up to me a lot. What's the most unusual one you've ever had? And that's probably, at the top of the list.
Is it?
Yeah, I can't think of any that were totally different out of context.
Yeah. Well, Barney Hall had an unfortunate accident where he got hit by a motorhome leaving Richmond in 1990. There's a little note here about Dad giving Barney a call at the hospital. Barney was an amazing guy, and I think that for you, he kind of was a mentor.
He was an incredible mentor. I mean, he taught me so many things. We could do a whole story, a whole section on Barney Hall and how, he's one of the 2 or 3 most trusted people that's ever been in the garage area that carries a microphone or typed on a typewriter. He's just that way. It was
true that he was a bit of an agent before there were agents.
He would be the guy. So, if Sterling Marlin wanted to talk to Junior Johnson or vice versa, we didn't have agents. And, Sterling wouldn't want, I'm using that one as an example because of all the deals Barney did, he took them all to his grave. As close of friends as we became, and I never asked him, but, he just would not go into that because he was that trustworthy to them.
Yeah.
And that's just one that kind of comes to mind because, Sterling went to work for Junior, that if Sterling was interested in talking to Junior or vice versa, they tell Barney, just talk to him, see what his contract is, if he's interested in talking or not. So if he went up into Sterling's hauler or Junior's hauler. Nobody thought anything about it.
Yeah.
But, back then, or even now, but especially back then, if they walked into each other, people would see them talking. So he would be the one that the driver or the car owner would go talk to see, are you even interested in talking? So he would do that. And, your dad and Barney, were very good friends, very good friends, and, incredible trust for Barney and for each other. And so we're leaving the racetrack at Richmond. I think it's 1990, if memory serves me. It's a really cold race. And you know how Laburnum Avenue is out front of the racetrack. So there's 2 lanes going one way, 2 lanes going the other. And we parked across the street so we could go the other direction to go to the airport. And there's a median
Still
there.
do it that way.
Yeah. So there's a median there, and a bunch of us had walked to the median, and some of us had gone on. And Barney and Jim Phillips were a little bit behind us. And what happened is they had a counterflow lane. So there's 2 lanes that would normally come this way. The one closest to them that would normally be coming right to left, they looked right and didn't see anything. They didn't think to look left. And as soon as they walked out, they walked into the side of a motorhome.
Oh.
If it'd been a little bit earlier, they may have been under it.
Right.
But they literally walked into the side of the motorhome, and we're standing there at the car, and we didn't hear it, but we look around. Where'd Barney and Jim go? And looked, and people were starting to gather around. They're laying in the road. So they got taken to the hospital. Both of them had a couple of broken ribs, and one of them had a collapsed lung. And
Jeez.
I rode in one ambulance, and I think it was Eli rode in the other, just to go there with them. So what Barney tells the story is, and he told us this several weeks later, said the nurse came in that night and said, Mr. Hall, there is a gentleman on the phone that is just bound and determined to talk to you and will not take no for an answer. And I've tried to tell him several times that, you're under anesthesia and all that. He said, will you answer, will you try to take his call? And Barney says, he's kind of groggy and said, yeah. And he said he picked up the phone. And the first thing he heard is somebody say, how in the hell do you call 400 laps of racing and you can't see a GD motorhome? And he said, I'm, a little bit stuttered and, And he said he repeated it. How in the hell do you call 400 laps of racing for all over the world and you can't see a damn motorhome? What's wrong with you? And he said, he's still a little bit, kind of stuttering and stammering and foggy. So the next thing he said, hey, it's Earnhardt. I think he called him something else. He said, hey, idiot, it's Earnhardt. How are you? And, he kind of was coming around and told him, he said, do I need to send my plane to go get your mama and Karen's his girlfriend, his mom? Do I need to send my plane to come take care of you?
Yeah.
Classic Dale Sr.
Yeah.
He's going to give you a hard time, but he will do anything for you, but he didn't want anybody to know about it.
Yeah.
You've probably heard thousands of those stories. But, when Barney told that story, no way he'd make it up.
Yeah.
But Dale wanted to send his plane if he needed.
I know they were I know they were close, and I know Dad thought the world of Barney, and everybody thought the world of Barney, but Dad was really a big fan of his. It says that and I'd never heard this, but Kelley might have mentioned it. I can't remember, but Kelley's name, her spelling, Kelley, is the same spelling as obviously your family name. Was there some connection there?
I found that story out when I was here and we were in the green room, which was your apartment up above where we're sitting right now, for the announcement of you going to Hendrick Motorsports. Never heard that story, but we were up there. I don't know if you were in the room yet or not, but I know Kelley was. I'm pretty sure your mom was standing there, and we were just chatting. And I have no recollection of how it came up, but Kelley told me that one of the names that your mom and dad agreed on for her, and I don't know if they knew it was a girl or not back then, if you knew that information in advance, but she said one of the names they agreed on was Kelley, and that your dad said he wanted it spelled like the store in Concord, not because it was Dad, but because he liked the spelling and it was different, most Kellys, or Kelley. And he said he liked that, and he said if we go with that, he'd like for it to be spelled out. And I'd never heard that story until we were making that announcement. So, that's something your sister Kelly and I have talked about from time to time, which just a neat family connection we had no idea existed.
If you want to support us here at Dirty Mo Media, one of the best ways that you can do this is to like this, comment on it, or subscribe to us on YouTube.